Saudi Arabia. What if everything you think you know about a country is incomplete? When most people hear the name Saudi Arabia, a single image appears: endless desert, oil wells, silence, and strict rules. A place you pass over on a map, not a place you imagine exploring, not a place you imagine changing. But that image is already outdated. Because right now, something rare is happening here. Not quietly, not slowly, but at a scale so massive, so sudden, that the world is still struggling to understand it. In the span of just a few years, a nation that once closed itself to outsiders has begun opening doors that were sealed for centuries. Beneath the sand, beneath the headlines, beneath the assumptions, Saudi Arabia is transforming in ways that feel almost unreal. Futuristic cities are rising where nothing once stood. Ancient civilizations are emerging from the desert, untouched for thousands of years. Traditions older than modern nations now coexist with ideas that look like science fiction. And yet, most of the world still isn't looking. That's what makes this moment extraordinary. Because Saudi Arabia is not just changing, it is changing while being misunderstood. And moments like this don't last forever. This is not a travel story about beaches or landmarks. This is a journey into contradiction, into mystery, into a place where the past and the future collide under the same burning sun. So before the narratives are settled, before the images become familiar, before the world decides what Saudi Arabia is, this is the moment to look closer. Stay with this journey, because what lies ahead is not what you expect. For decades, Saudi Arabia existed in the global imagination as a place of distance geographically, culturally, emotionally, not because it was unreachable, but because it was unseen. This was a land where stories traveled outward, but images rarely did. A country known through headlines rather than faces, through policies rather than people, through assumptions rather than experience. While other nations invited the world in, Saudi Arabia remained quiet, deliberately reserved. Its deserts stretched beyond the horizon, its cities lived behind closed doors, and its culture unfolded away from foreign eyes. To many outsiders, that silence was mistaken for emptiness. But silence does not mean absence. Beneath that quiet exterior lived one of the oldest continuous cultures on Earth, shaped by trade routes, pilgrimage paths, empires rising and falling, and generations who learned how to survive where survival itself was an art. The desert here was never empty. It was patient, and patience changes everything. Because when a place remains unseen for too long, the world begins to fill in the blanks with imagination, fear, stereotypes, half-truths. Saudi Arabia became a symbol rather than a place reduced to a single story, repeated until it felt complete. But no country is ever just one story. And now, that long silence is breaking, not with explanations, not with apologies, but with presence. What makes this moment so powerful is not simply that Saudi Arabia is opening up. It's that it is doing so after centuries of being observed from a distance. The contrast is jarring. The shift feels almost unreal. A land once defined by what it withheld is now revealing what it preserved. And the question is no longer why Saudi Arabia stayed silent for so long. The real question is far more unsettling. What happens when a place the world never truly understood finally decides to show itself on its own terms? Saudi Arabia. Then came oil. Not gradually, not gently, but like a force that rewrote destiny almost overnight. Beneath the same desert that once demanded patience and survival lay one of the most powerful resources in human history. Oil transformed Saudi Arabia from a quiet kingdom into a global pivot point, a place where decisions made in the sand could ripple across continents. Suddenly, the world could not ignore Saudi Arabia anymore. Skylines rose where tents once stood. Wealth arrived faster than culture could explain it. Power accumulated not through conquest, but through control of energy, the invisible fuel behind modern civilization. Yet here lies the paradox. Oil gave Saudi Arabia everything, and at the same time, trapped it in a single story. To the outside world, the country became synonymous with oil, as if an entire civilization could be reduced to a commodity. The ancient trade routes, the poetry, the desert wisdom, the spiritual gravity, all overshadowed by black liquid pulled from the earth. Inside the kingdom, leaders understood something the world often forgot. Oil is finite, influence is not, and that realization planted a quiet question deep beneath the wealth. What happens when the resource that built everything begins to lose its power? Most nations cling to what made them rich. Saudi Arabia is doing the opposite. Instead of waiting for decline, it is preparing for reinvention. This is what makes the current moment so dangerous and so fascinating. Because abandoning dependence on oil is not an economic decision alone. It is a cultural risk, a political gamble, a challenge to identity itself. And yet, Saudi Arabia is making that bet in full view of the world. The desert that once demanded survival now demands imagination. And as the age of oil slowly approaches its horizon, Saudi Arabia is not looking backward at what it was, but forward at what it might become. The question is no longer whether Saudi Arabia can change. The question is whether the world is ready to understand why it must. And then, Saudi Arabia did something that made the world pause. It announced Neom, not a city in the traditional sense, but a statement, a provocation, a vision so ambitious that many dismissed it instantly. A city without cars, without streets, without pollution, a straight line stretching through the desert, designed for a future that doesn't fully exist yet. To some, Neom sounds impossible. To others, arrogant. To many, pure science fiction. But that reaction misses the point. Neom is not just about architecture or technology. It is about intent. Because building something like this in the middle of one of the harshest landscapes on Earth is not logical. It is symbolic. The same desert that once limited life is now being challenged by imagination. Where survival once required restraint, the future now demands reinvention. What makes Neom so unsettling is not whether it will succeed. It's the question it forces us to confront. What happens when a nation with immense resources decides not to imitate the world but to redesign it? Saudi Arabia is not following global models. It is testing its own. And that makes people uncomfortable. History shows that radical ideas are rarely welcomed at first. They are doubted, criticized, even mocked, until they work. Or until they fail spectacularly. And Neom sits precisely on that knife edge. If it succeeds, it redefines how humans live, move, and coexist with nature. If it fails, it becomes one of the most expensive experiments in modern history. Either way, it cannot be ignored. Because Neom is not really about the future of Saudi Arabia. It's about a deeper, more unsettling thought. If a nation born from desert and oil can imagine a city like this, what assumptions about the limits of our world are we still clinging to? Here, in the silence of the sand, Saudi Arabia isn't just building structures. It's testing the boundaries of what the future is allowed to look like. Saudi Arabia. If Neom represents the future Saudi Arabia is daring to imagine, Alula represents the past it protected by accident. For thousands of years, this place remained hidden in plain sight. Towering sandstone formations, carved tombs, and entire cities shaped directly from rock, left untouched. Not because they were forgotten, but because the desert demanded respect. Wind and sand erased roads, not history, and time slowed to a crawl. Long before modern borders existed, Alula was a living crossroads. Traders passed through with incense and spices. Civilizations rose, worshipped, carved their presence into stone, and then vanished. The Nabateans left behind tombs so precise they feel engineered rather than carved. Their city, now known as Hegra, rivals Petra in scale and mystery, yet remained sealed to the outside world until recently. What makes Alula unsettling is not its age, it's its preservation. In a world where ancient sites are crowded, restored, photographed, and filtered into familiarity, Al-Ula still feels untouched. The rock faces stand alone against the sky. The silence here is heavy, not empty, but watchful. Standing in Al-Ula doesn't feel like visiting history. It feels like intruding on it, and that is exactly why it matters. Saudi Arabia did not rush to show this place to the world. It waited, protected it. Let the desert do what it does best, preserve what humans often destroy through exposure. Now, as Al-Ula opens its gates, the timing feels intentional, because you cannot understand where Saudi Arabia is going without seeing where it came from. Here, surrounded by stone shaped by hands that disappeared millennia ago, the narrative shifts. Saudi Arabia is no longer just oil and ambition. It becomes something older, deeper, more complex. Al-Ula whispers a quiet warning beneath the spectacle of the future. Civilizations don't begin with skyscrapers. They begin with memory, and Saudi Arabia remembers. After the stone memories of Al-Ula, the journey moves from ancient silence to living devotion. Because at the heart of Saudi Arabia lies Mecca, a place that billions of people orient their lives toward, yet most of humanity will never witness directly. Every day, across continents and cultures, people turn in the same direction. Not toward a flag, not toward a government, but toward a point in the desert. That alone is extraordinary. Mecca is not powerful because it is seen. It is powerful because it is felt. Unlike monuments built to impress, Mecca does not ask to be photographed or explained. Its meaning exists beyond images, beyond language, beyond access. And perhaps that is why it has retained such gravity in a world obsessed with visibility. Here, the past is not buried like in Al-Ula, it is lived. Rituals performed today mirror those carried out centuries ago. Movements repeated by millions echo the footsteps of generations long gone. Time does not disappear in Mecca. It layers. Past and present exist simultaneously, bound by faith rather than stone. This is where the transformation of Saudi Arabia becomes impossible to simplify. Because while futuristic cities rise and ancient ruins re-emerge, Mecca remains unchanged in its purpose. It anchors the nation not politically, not economically, but spiritually. And that continuity matters. It explains something the outside world often misses. Saudi Arabia's transformation is not an abandonment of identity. It is a negotiation with it, a careful balance between motion and meaning. You cannot understand the ambition of the future without understanding the weight of this center. In Mecca, Saudi Arabia reveals a truth that reshapes everything that came before. Progress here is not about replacing the past. It is about moving forward without losing direction. And in a world that often forgets where it's going, that might be the most radical vision of all. If Mecca represents continuity, the unbroken center, then the society surrounding it tells a more complicated story. For much of the modern era, Saudi Arabia was defined not by what it allowed, but by what it restrained. Daily life followed strict codes. Public behavior was monitored. Entertainment was limited. Change arrived slowly, if at all. To outsiders, this rigidity became the defining image of the nation. But that image only tells half the truth. What the world often interpreted as resistance to change was, from the inside, a strategy of preservation. In a region shaped by rapid collapse, foreign intervention, and cultural erosion, Saudi Arabia chose caution over chaos, stability over experimentation, control over uncertainty. And for decades, that approach worked. It created one of the most socially cohesive societies in the region, bound by faith, tradition, and shared values. But cohesion came at a cost. As the world accelerated, the gap between Saudi Arabia and global culture widened. The silence deepened. The misunderstandings grew. From the outside, the country appeared frozen in time. From the inside, pressure was building. A new generation grew up connected to the world digitally, but constrained physically. They saw change everywhere except at home. And that tension, invisible to outsiders, quietly reshaped the future. This is the missing link. Saudi Arabia's transformation did not begin with skyscrapers or mega-projects. It began with an internal realization that protecting identity does not mean rejecting motion forever. The conservatism that once shielded the nation now stood at a crossroads. Adapt or risk irrelevance. Understanding this moment is crucial, because the changes that follow are not sudden rebellions against tradition. They are calculated shifts, carefully measured, tightly controlled, designed to release pressure without breaking the core. What comes next will look shocking to the world. But from here, it is not chaos. It is a release. What followed that release was not gradual reform. It was acceleration. Almost overnight, the image the world had memorized began to fracture. Rules that had defined daily life for generations shifted. Doors that had been locked for decades opened. And a society long associated with restraint stepped into motion fast enough to make outsiders question if they were watching the same country. Women began driving a simple act elsewhere, but here, a symbol loaded with meaning. Cinemas reopened after decades of silence. Concerts filled arenas. Art, fashion, sport, and nightlife entered spaces where absence once defined identity. To the world, it looked sudden. To Saudi Arabia, it was overdue. Because beneath the surface, the pressure described earlier had been building for years. A young population, educated, connected, ambitious, was ready. Not to erase tradition, but to live alongside it. What appeared as shock was, in reality, release. And the speed mattered. Change introduced slowly can be resisted. Change introduced decisively reshapes reality before resistance can organize. Saudi Arabia chose decisiveness. But this was not chaos. It was controlled momentum. Each reform calibrated, each opening measured. The country was not chasing approval. It was reclaiming agency over its own timeline. This is the moment many observers misunderstand. Saudi Arabia is not becoming something else. It is expanding what it allows itself to be. Tradition did not vanish when the lights turned on. Faith did not disappear when music returned. Instead, something rare happened. Contradiction became coexistence. Minarets still rise above the skyline. But now, neon lights glow beneath them. And in that contrast lies the true shock. Because the most surprising part of Saudi Arabia's transformation is not that it changed. It's that it changed without losing its center. What comes next will test that balance. And whether the world sees this as reinvention or disruption will depend on one thing: how well it understands where this momentum is actually coming from. And this is where the story quietly shifts. Because beneath the mega-projects, the headlines, and the shock of rapid change, Saudi Arabia's transformation is not being driven by buildings or policies, but by people. Walk through the streets of Riyadh, Jeddah, or smaller desert towns, and a different narrative emerges. One that rarely makes the news. Conversations are warm. Curiosity is mutual. Hospitality is instinctive, not performative. Guests are still guests here, not content. What surprises many visitors is how deeply personal this moment feels to ordinary Saudis. For years, they watched the world talk about them, rarely with them, their country reduced to symbols, their lives flattened into stereotypes. And now, as the doors open, there is a quiet eagerness to finally be seen as individuals, not assumptions. Young Saudis speak of possibility. Older generations speak of caution. And between them lies a shared awareness. This is a once-in-a-lifetime transition. The youth are not trying to escape their culture. They are trying to carry it forward. To live in a world that is connected without becoming diluted. To embrace opportunity without losing meaning. This is why the changes feel so intense. They are not cosmetic. They are emotional. For many Saudis, this era represents the first time they feel their future expanding faster than their past is closing in. And that expansion carries both excitement and fear, a tension that gives this moment its human weight. From the outside, Saudi Arabia's story looks geopolitical. From the inside, it feels deeply personal. And once you understand that, the transformation stops looking like a spectacle and starts looking like a collective leap, a society, long defined by restraint, learning in real time how to breathe in a larger world without forgetting who it is when it exhales. What remains now is the final question, not about cities, not about oil, not even about reform, but about legacy. And that is where this journey must end. And this is where the journey comes to rest, not with an answer, but with a realization. Saudi Arabia is not a destination you can fully understand by arriving late. It is a country moving through a narrow window in history, a moment where past, present, and future briefly overlap before separating again. What we are witnessing is not a finished transformation. It is a country mid-sentence, a society learning how to open without dissolving, how to modernize without erasing memory, how to invite the world in, while still deciding what parts of itself remain sacred. That uncertainty is exactly what makes this moment so powerful. Years from now, Saudi Arabia will look different. The questions will be answered. The shock will fade into familiarity. And when that happens, this version of the story will no longer exist. So this is not just a video about a place. It's about timing, about choosing to look before the narrative settles, before the future becomes normal, before mystery turns into archive. If this journey changed the way you see Saudi Arabia, even slightly, then it has done its job. And if you're curious to keep exploring places the world thinks it already understands, places where history is still unfolding in real time, stay with this channel. Subscribe for more journeys beyond the headlines. And tell me in the comments, which country should we explore next before the world finishes explaining it for us? Because the most powerful stories aren't found where everyone is looking. They're found in the moments just before everyone arrives.